Well, speaking about the part of your book has juicy tidbits where he does unload, quite frankly, about his colleagues, right? Both the old guard, whom we were told were the adults in the room, people like Mitch McConnell, people like Chris Christie, and I guess you could say the new guard, right? Even Jorge Santos III. Oh, I'm sorry, George Santos, and others like DeSantis. And there's I'm going to read some of these quotes, and the question that I have after reading these quotes for you, something to think about is, after spending so much time with him, McKay, if he knew this, what I'm about to say, your quotes of him saying this, is he complicit in your opinion, or was he the stopgap? And this is what he says in your book about his colleagues with whom he, let's be honest, served with for years and defended. This is what he says about Donald Trump. He is unquestionably mentally unstable. He is racist, bigoted, misogynistic, xenophobic, vulgar, and prone to violence. That's a quote, folks. On Pence, he is a lapdog for Trump. No one had been more loyal, more willing to smile when he saw absurdities, more willing to ascribe God's will to things that were ungodly than Mike Pence. Chris Christie, another bridge and tunnel loudmouth. With DeSantis, he said there's no warmth at all. He looks like he's got a toothache. But he said, he warned, I should say, he's much smarter than Trump. There's a peril to having someone who's smart and pulling in a direction that's dangerous. And then finally, Mitch McConnell, the Grim Reaper of the Senate, and who's seen, by the way, as one of the last remaining adults in the room. You wrote that Mr. Romney questioned, quote, which version of McConnell was more authentic, the one who did Trump's bidding in public, or the one who excoriated him in their private conversations?
Yeah, the question of complicity that you're asking is in some ways the question that I kept asking throughout the book, right? And he was asking himself too. I think that's what made him interesting, is that he was willing to kind of honestly grapple with questions of complicity. I think in some of the cases that you just, quoted there, he's been pretty consistently outspoken against, for example, Donald Trump, right? What you just read was a quote from an email he sent to Chris Christie during the 2016 primaries, trying to talk Christie out of endorsing Trump. And I think that pretty, cleanly lines up with things that he said in public about Donald Trump. Some of the other stuff I think is more revelatory. And I think, for example, Mitch McConnell is a case where, on the one hand, Romney has worked really closely with McConnell since he's been a senator, and he's praised him in public. And I think in some ways he does respect the way that he kind of works the caucus, but he also kind of often was driven crazy by how McConnell was talking out both sides of his mouth, right? Like in private, he would say things like Trump is an idiot, and Mitt, you're lucky you can say the things we all think, but we're not allowed to say. But then in public, he's constantly defending Trump and doing what Trump wants. And so, I think that one of the things Romney kind of admitted to me was that throughout his career, there have been moments where he would rationalize the things that were in his self-interest, right? Mm-hmm. He would kind of reach this moment where he knew what he really thought or what he really wanted to do, but then he also knew what he had to do to win. And he would do the thing that it took to win and then talk himself into believing that it was also the right thing to do. And, maybe it was his rationalization was, it's important that I'm in the room because I'm the adult in the room, and we need a voice of sanity there. That's often what we've heard in the Trump era. And sometimes it was just, I would be a great president. I need to do what it takes to become president. And once I become president, I'll do so much good for people. And that's the rationalization that every presidential candidate in history has used to talk themselves into doing things they knew they shouldn't do. And so, I think that Romney recognizes now his capacity for self-rationalization, self-justification in a way that he probably didn't recognize or was trying hard not to recognize for a lot of his career. But the reason that I think his is an interesting case study is that this is the same psychology that his whole party is using, right? Like the Republican caucus, all of these senators in private will tell him, Mitt, I'm so glad you're standing up against Trump. I'm so glad you're saying the stuff you're saying. I wish I could say the same stuff, but I can't because I'm, up for re-election or whatever. And that would drive him crazy. But like, that is where we've been for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, whatever. Like, all these Republican leaders know that the stuff that they're defending is outrageous, dangerous, bad for democracy, bad for the country, but they're not willing to say it because it would hurt their own short-term political advantage. And so the question is, can we break that cycle? And, I think that like this book is not an effort to turn Mitt Romney into a hero. It's not a hagiography. It's just kind of an effort to look at like, here is a case of one politician who was able to break the cycle and start telling the truth. And what could, are there any lessons we can take from that story that would incentivize other political leaders to start telling the truth as well?
What I think is really interesting about that first is the idea that he actually has self-reflection and is grappling with complicity, which I feel like self-reflection is just devoid in the Republican Party is just devoid of that whatsoever. They're not in the business of reflecting. They're in the business of doing and destroying. That being said, I think that what also needs to be aired out is the fact that he's able, and you tell me, I find that Mitt Romney is able to say and do the things that he does because he is so wealthy, right? Because he has the wealth and the privilege that allows for protection and safety. And I think that, it was said that, a lot of these people that we see are not given protection, are not given security, right? Like if you want security, if you're being threatened on a regular basis, it's our tax dollars are not going to fund their security. They're doing that themselves. And so what part of it, McKay, do you think is this internal grappling? Yes, but is it also, I don't need these donors. I don't need this job. I don't need really anything, that
I'm
allows
rich.
him. Yeah, I'm right,
So I think there is definitely something to that. And I'll tell you a story that I think makes that point. I will just point out, though, that I don't know what the average, net worth of a U.S. senator is, but it's quite a bit
broke.
higher than the average American. Like most of them are millionaires. So,
right.
I'm just pointing that out because I think that it's important to understand that it's not just the lack of options that keeps these people needing to win re-election. One of the things Romney told me was like, when I got to the Senate, I realized just how much psychic currency my fellow senators attach to their jobs, right? Like a lot, to them, they don't need the government paycheck, right? But they need the status that comes with the position, the office, the staff, the trappings, right? And a lot of them are in their 60s, 70s, even 80s. And the idea of not being a senator is almost akin to death, right?
Yeah.
Like they need that job. But to your point, after January 6th, Mitt Romney told me that he heard from a number of members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, who told him that they wanted, and during the second impeachment trial,